Okay. Welcome back to Percona Live 2023 in Denver. I now have Rachel Stevens, who does wonderful things for RedMonk, but today she was one of our keynotes, and she based her keynote on a Rob Reiner movie, one of my favorites. I'm glad it wasn't Stand By Me or When Harry Met Sally. That doesn't really mesh well into the open source or database worlds for the most part. You were drawing analogies between The Princess Bride and open source.
That's correct. It was good. I'm kind of wishing I had done Stand By Me now that you mention it, though. Maybe that'll have to be next time.
Well, I didn't want Kiefer Sutherland, using the stick to stick the dead body of proprietary software, but cool. So let's give you a brief, what do you do at RedMonk and why do you do it?
Yeah, so this is, somebody was asking me how long I worked at RedMonk, and I realized today is actually my work anniversary. So I've been at RedMonk for 7 years to the day, which is awesome. And it's been a wonderful place to work. We're a small team. The classy way to say it is we are a boutique analyst firm, but we're a team of 8. We're small but mighty, and we work on helping our clients understand what's happening in the industry. And we also open source all of our research. So whether you are a client or not, you can read our research, and then we also do consulting with our clients.
Well, one of the things I used to find frustrating when I was working for Fortune 100 companies was Forrester and Gartner would come out and say the exact opposite thing. And by the way, Gartner data is running right now, so I'm sure they'll probably miss all this. And it was always interesting to see how the industry analysts can point in 2 different directions with the same material.
Well, I mean, you're a database guy. You know the data can say anything you want it to say. That's the beauty of it. But I think it's a tricky job because I think a lot of the times we're trying to prognosticate. People are coming at it from different contexts and different backgrounds. And I think all of my colleagues in the industry analyst world are probably doing the best they have with the information they have. The worldview that RedMonk tends to have and has served us well thus far has been trying to focus on what impacts the developer and the practitioner. So people who have their hands on the keyboard, who are using the software day to day. So developer is kind of our worldview and our focus, but it's also operators and database people, security people. But the people who are in the trenches tend to have a good feel for what is happening, what needs to be used, what the problems are. And when we've tried to focus on what it is that matters to them, it really has paid dividends to us in trying to figure out what's happening in the industry overall.
Well, 2 years ago, according to the DB Engine ranking, the collateral database line went down and crossed the open source database line. And open source databases have been doing a big revolution the past several years. I think part of that is NoSQL scare a lot of the big vendors into putting extra features like JSON data types into the relational databases. And it's been rather nice to watch all that. And I come from an era where I worked for companies that bought equipment exclusively from Digital Equipment Corporation, and they killed off Tops 10, Tops 20, Arista C, Ultrix, and eventually Vax BMS. So I come from an area where nothing was open, nothing interoperated. Your entire investment could be literally wiped out at the whim of a CEO and a board. And the idea that you could get Unix that would run on a couple machines, Linuxes and some PDP-11s, that was kind of cool. And then this crazy guy from Finland gives away an operating system. 2 weeks ago at Open Source Summit, I actually found a picture of Linus Torvalds as a saint.
Oh. And
I'll have to show that to you later. And it's amazing. I mean, I'm not the only one that thinks, thank God for Linus Torvalds and Richard Stallman and all these other folks that said, we need to be able to do this. And your presentation today started off with an example tie-in to this wonderful book/movie about a contentious young princess who's having impending matrimonial issues, and her outside interest has been kidnapped by the dread pirate Roberts, but he suddenly reappears at an inopportune time and throws the entire monarchy into chaos. That's probably the worst summary of that story whatsoever. But that movie has some of the best lines ever.
It really does. It's so quotable.
Yeah, you also had a quote in there that I'll Bruce Momgen of Enterprise EDB and Postgres core committer and I were both laughing at a line that you had that you used to work at the speed of paper, which was great. Because in the old days, when you made a change to a database, you had to go through a configuration committee and get sign off and had the a couple of heads down on it. And, are you sure we need this extra field? This email thing, is it going to catch on? Do we really need to put that into the employee record?
Exactly. And I think for me, the point of this was talking about how sometimes when people are working with the database teams, and this was kind of back when I was a DBA, so it was some time ago. It's one of those ones where I think the developer desire to move quickly was sometimes at odds with what the DBAs wanted and needed. And so part of my talk was trying to highlight what this actually, like what the database administrator world could look like. And for me, it looked like a whole lot pronounced because I had to print everything out to pass my internal audits. And so that was the reference to moving at the speed of paper. And so it's great if you have a very performant database, but if your team behind it is kind of saddled with difficult processes and a lot of compliance needs or things that make it hard for them to make any kind of change at speed, it's going to make it hard to have your teams be effective.
Well, the entire paradigm of agile development is anathema to what DBAs are supposed to do. We're supposed to keep the data safe and stable, and these guys are coming 3 times a day wanting to add these fields in this table and access to this and grab all this. And by the way, could you stick a video in there?
Yes, it makes it tricky because neither party is wrong. Like the developers are working in a way in which they are trying to achieve their goals. They're trying to experiment. They're trying to get tools to work and to build applications that serve the business, which is great. And we also have database administrators who are trying to keep data safe. We have people who are trying to make sure we have data integrity, to make sure that our systems are reliable and up and that nobody's hammering the database with queries while we're trying to write things. And there's a lot of things that everyone is trying to do and nobody is in the wrong. It's just that it's sometimes hard to get alignment. And so I think when we start to get to a place where we start to bring some of that agile or DevOps mindset into the data world, it's a hard transition, but I think it's a necessary transition.
Well, one of the things that scares me in the agile Kubernetes world is a couple months ago, a friend of mine came to me and said, the corporate lawyer said, hey, can we have a snapshot as of this date several years ago on a dedicated server because we have some legal issues coming up from that. And it's like, I'm not sure I can go back and get that version of the database software, the Linux kernel, or if I can find hardware that will run all that. And it's one of those scary words, when you're changing the schema 2 or 3 times a month, that's one thing. When you're changing the schema 2 or 3 times an hour, and suddenly the lawyers come back and say, hey, as of 9 o'clock on the 25th of May, can you recreate that environment for me? Have we dug ourselves into a pit?
That's rough. I think that's a hard request for anybody. I think there's a lot of things that would make that very tricky. And I guess my heart goes out to the backup and recovery team on that one. But I do think that there are ways that we can start to get to a point where we have compliance baked into our systems. We have some of these guardrails. We have some of these things automated and helping us move faster and also have the things in place that we need to in order to be compliant. And there's tools that help us do that. There's tools that are helping us mask like PII data in our test databases. There's tools that are helping us replicate our data well. There's tools that are helping us snapshot. So it's not like it's something that we all need to do on our own. It's not all process driven by your data team. Like ideally, you're also, if you're asking your teams to make this shift and take more responsibility for going faster, you also have to give them the tools to help them do that. You can't just throw the work over the wall.
Okay, so RedMonk has the crystal ball.
We do not.
Where do you think we're going to be in 3 to 5 years?
Where do you think we're going to be in 3 to 5 years?
I mean, ChatGPT can't run everything, so...
Can't run everything. I agree with that. I think there's no argument there. I do think that AI and LLM is a bit of a genie out of the bottle situation in that I think that it's going to change the way in which we as technologists work, learn, and scaffold things. So I think the idea of eliminating toil, eliminating just kind of the scaffolding and the glue work of things, getting things to work. I think we have seen some really compelling experiments already of people who've been able to use LLM models, be it Copilot or ChatGPT, to start having the system scaffold things out for us, which is great because it frees us up to do different things. I do think that there's going to be some workforce impacts from that. I'm mostly optimistic about it. I think that the goal of having automation, like as developers and as technologists, like our job is to automate ourselves out of jobs over and over again. Like our job is to always be trying to make things better, trying to do things. So I don't necessarily think that this is like the last automation and then everybody is done. I do think that there's going to be some short-term impacts as people try to figure out what that looks like. But I think that overall we're in a place where the demand for software is actually going to go up overall.
So I'm in my IDE and ChatGPT is looking at my shoulder saying, no, you don't want to implement it that way. Someone else is doing another part of the code here. Could you possibly borrow their structures?
So a good example is I was trying to, so I use R as my language of choice when I'm graphing and charting things for my research pieces. And so I was trying to make an animated piece, and I never do animated charts for the most part. I'm pretty much all static and boring. But I wanted to see what an animated chart would look like, and I was struggling with it and trying to figure it out and had a million tabs open from Stack Overflow, trying to just like paste people's code in and see what was going to happen. And I finally was like, oh, duh, I should go look at ChatGPT and see it. And it didn't get it right, but it got me in the right direction. It helped me ask the right question, and it helped me find the right direction to go. And so I think that is an interesting, like when I'm talking about new learning paradigms, I think that the paradigm is trying to figure out how to, like people talk about prompt engineer in a way that I think is interesting and a little bit.
So it's
like an artist, but
so it'll become a combination of the rubber ducking and the guy across in the other cube pre-COVID. Hey, Tony, do you remember how this works?
Rubber ducking, the guy across the cube, and Stack Overflow, I think are all going to go together in an interesting way.
Well, the bugbear for me with Stack Overflow is someone will ask something about MySQL, and the first answer that pops up is something that was valid 20 years ago, and it's like, no.
The worst is, have you ever asked Stack Overflow and then had the answer be something that you answered?
No, I haven't had that.
It's like, I forgot that one, my bad.
No, what's embarrassing is when you see yourself referenced in someone else's slide deck and you're going, ooh, I should have phrased that better. They'd be misinterpreted. Okay, so back to the most important thing. Princess Bride.
Okay.
Did you have the inspiration of, I need to do a computer talk about the Princess Bride, or you figure, well, I want to talk at Percona Live about open source, and suddenly you were thinking, well, there's something here that could use Robin Penwright and Carrie Ewells to help me through this?
I was really hoping you weren't going to make me do my impression.
Uh-oh.
But
everyone loves a Carrie Ewells impression or a Peter Fall confession.
So the way that this talk came to be is entirely because I don't even remember what it was, but I had an internal Slack conversation with my team where we were talking about open source licensing, and I said I could totally open a talk with like the Princess Bride, impressive clergyman, but instead of marriage just what brings us together, I could totally talk about Oracle. And so that is actually how...
That is the best Peter Cook imitation I've seen by an American, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I practiced a lot. I apologize to whoever had the hotel room next to me last night because I did it a lot of times. I really hope the walls here were thick. I was really nervous to do that in front of 200 people. And now apparently the whole internet. So it was good times. But I built the entire talk based off around that one joke.
Okay. So next year we can expect another movie theme talk from you, or?
Yes, I'm in. I enjoyed building that talk for you all. It was a lot of fun for me.
Well, ironically, last week I was talking to someone about, we see stuff in science fiction and it pops up. When I was a kid, the idea that Captain Kirk could pull somebody out of his pocket and ask, to be Ubered, essentially, to a winning spacecraft was, oh no, that will never happen. The little medical monitors that Bones carried around, we can kind of see that. But the idea of the old movie Colossus the Forbin Project, which is where a supercomputer, hyper intelligent, tries to run the world. It was one of those things where, even back then, I'm sure people thought it was silly. But there's so much that we've gotten from movies that kind of help us through life. And there's so many great quotes from The Princess Bride, the almost dead and the inconceivable.
I was really sad that I didn't get to the dream sequence with the booing didn't make it. I tried so hard to figure out how to get the boos in there, and I just couldn't make it work.
Well, the cheesy giant rats, I could see you kind of sneaking one of those in there and throwing that in the audience, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So any other things from The Princess Bride you wish you could have snuck in there? I mean, you have fun storming the castle, he's partially dead.
The other one that I wanted was it was a debate on when I was talking about developer velocity, and I had a hard debate between, I thought I was going faster while they're climbing up the cliffs of insanity versus the Miracle Max, like, don't rush me, you get a rotten miracle. It's like those ones where I had a hard time debating, and the cliffs of insanity ultimately won that one. But yes, I was sad that I didn't have any rotten miracles either.
Well, it's hard to get a good Andre the Giant reference these days.
Fair.
To be fair. Well, thank you very much. By the way, the keynotes were recorded, and you haven't paid off the big check to have that destroyed yet. So it will be live sometime very, very soon. And it was probably the best keynote I've seen in a long time. And I think you got the entire audience to buy in. So there's a lot of closet Princess Bride fans out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I had a great time doing it. And I appreciate the chance to be on the podcast with you.
Okay. Thank you.